So 2020, not been a particularly good year, and I'm not just talking game industry wise, but in general. In fact, this is probably the case with many people around the world. I'd say that this has been the worst year of my life. With everything going on nowadays between the pandemic as well as tensions around the country, more people than ever are finding their way to video games as an escape from this horrid year. Unfortunately, not even gaming is free from bullshit, so in this video, as is tradition, we'll be looking at some of the things that happened this year, good and bad, starting off with each of the three main platforms and following up with some general non-platform specific pieces. Let's start off with Nintendo. Let's just say that this wasn't really their year. I mean, they've had excellent Switch hardware sales, probably better hardware sales than all the other platforms, but that's about it. In the beginning of the year, they released Animal Crossing New Horizons, which is a great game and honestly is probably the Nintendo game of the year right there. From there on, not much else of note. They released the scummy limited time Mario 3D All-Stars collection, which I still regret pre-ordering off eBay during the panic to get physical copies. Everyone thought the physical copies would have a very limited release, so scalpers went all at it, but day of release, you could easily find it at your local Walmart for $10 cheaper than anywhere else, as is usual with the store. I was really pissed at that point. I still haven't touched the game since I got it because I already got my Super Mario 64 fix after one of the mini Nintendo leaks of the year landed the source code into homebrewers' hands and they ported it to 3DS as well as everything else they could manage to stuff it on, including the PC, the Vita, the Wii U, and even the frickin' PS2 of all things. But anyway, that isn't the only scummy thing they've done this year. Getting to more recent events, they canceled the Smash Melee tournament from the Big House for using a program called Slippy, making claims of piracy despite all the countless legit physical copies of Melee they had legally purchased in the past. They also canceled the end of the Splatoon 2 official tournament for the teams showing support for #FreeMelee, and then proceeded on top of that to also send a cease and desist to Etikons, a JoyCon skin dedicated to Etika and support a charity, which honestly is probably one of the biggest things they've done that's pissed me off this year. And as is usual, the JoyCon Drift lawsuits have continued. Despite how awful Joy-Cons are, Nintendo has kept producing them with no care in the world at their own rip-off prices. They've offered free repairs, but since they'll just drift again within a month or so, it makes no difference. I finally gave up on mine and ordered a third-party pair, and it was one of the best decisions I made this year, as they are loads better than anything Nintendo will ever make, which is kind of depressing, as usually it's all the other way around when it comes to third-party controllers versus official controllers. Nintendo just doesn't care since the Switch itself is selling so well, and I bet the awful controllers have aided in the sales of the overpriced Pro controllers, as that's what I immediately jumped to buying back when my Joy-Con started drifting. I mean, the Pro controller is great and all, but I didn't like feeling forced to buy it just because what Nintendo included in the box with the console just didn't work. A bit of common knowledge here, but Nintendo continued to be anti-consumer in their refund policy, basically having none. While Sony is at least not entirely anti-refunds, though they're pretty close, and Xbox has been the most pro-consumer in terms of game refunds, allowing nearly anything to be refunded if they've only been played for a few hours. Like I said, all around, Nintendo hasn't been very favorable this year. Moving on to brighter news, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remastered came to Switch. It also came to Xbox One and PS4, but the fact that we got a real racing game, something that rarely happens on the Switch outside of countless mediocre kart racers and trash mobile ports, is really great. Funny how I complained about this last year and probably the year before it, but we're still not seeing the racing genre as represented on the Switch as it should be. Thankfully, EA has slightly filled the gap with not only Hot Pursuit Remastered, but Burnout Paradise Remastered too, even though I think the base price of that game is victim to the Switch rip-off price raise. In terms of other ports that felt at home, we got Borderlands Collection, BioShock Collection, Alien Isolation, and XCOM 2, just to name a few off the top of my head. In a quick piece regarding Smash Ultimate, Sephiroth from Final Fantasy came to the game as the most recent DLC fighter, which got Smash players all around the world excited. There's been a few fighters this year, with the weirdest one to me being Steve from Minecraft, but it seems Sephiroth has had the biggest hype based on the reactions I've seen online. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity came came out, and if you're wondering why I'm just randomly mentioning it, it's because I really liked it. When it was first announced, I had zero interest in the game whatsoever, just because I thought it was another version of the same game that I can still play on my Wii U, just with a different story. But when I went over to a friend's house shortly after it came out and we played split screen for a few hours, I'll go as far as to say that I enjoyed it way more than the first Hyrule Warriors game, and my thoughts on it took a complete 180. It just feels more fleshed out, and while it does have its own problems, like how well it performs, as does every AAA game this year practically, it's definitely worth checking out, especially given that it has a pretty decent demo. Star Wars Jedi Academy and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer Switch ports finally released, both of which I was very excited for because one of them is tied with Republic Commando as my favorite Star Wars game. Please release that on the Switch as well. And the other because there hasn't really been any easy way to play it, as the original PC version doesn't run on modern systems, and the N64 version just doesn't want to be emulated. Both were welcome additions that I've played the hell out of and I'm still playing today. And for the final Switch related news, Among Us got a Switch port. I honestly couldn't care less, but it's pretty much been this year's Minecraft, and with that, it's quite popular on the system. Moving away from the Switch, the Wii and Wii U got a new game in 2020, Shakedown Hawaii, which, I mean, other systems got it earlier, even the 3DS, but still, to see the Wii, especially the Wii U of all things, get any support in 2020 is just fascinating. To end things off on the Nintendo side, Nintendo finally discontinued the 2DS and 3DS line of systems. Rest in peace to what was an amazing handheld system. I may find it harder to come back to the 3DS for long periods of time nowadays, having been spoiled by much larger capacity games from systems like the Switch that easily satisfy my desire for larger scale games on the go, but back in its prime days, I loved the system. I never got too many games for it, especially not compared to the Vita, but the ones I did, I enjoyed thoroughly, and I know everybody back when I went to high school was playing the 3DS, and the games weren't the only great thing about it. To this day, I still wish the Switch could get some kind of Street Pass, because that had to have been my favorite feature on the system, besides maybe Miiverse, but that's long since been gone. From going to school, to riding the public bus, to going to conventions out of city, to just simply walking down the street, it was so much fun just seeing how many different people I could tag and not only see what they were playing, but to also get a taste of their personality through their set messages or likes. Plus, I loved playing Find Me and collecting various hats. Moving on to Sony, I'd say it's been a pretty rough year for them too. I mean, they are still the #1 platform out of all three, but the PS5 released, and as is a common theme with everything this year, scalpers assisted Sony in absolutely destroying the launch. On one side, the PS5s themselves have had multitudes of issues, and there has been a lot of broken PS5s. On the other side, we're talking about the few that people have even been able to get their hands on because of their constant out-of-stock state, since scalpers have been using bots to make millions of dollars off of PS5s by selling them for over $1,000 each. Sometimes even having people getting their hands on them only for them to instantly be bricked because Sony has flagged them as stolen consoles. It's got bad enough that people have actively been tracking down scalpers just to rob them, with one scalper even being doxxed online, which, you know what, that's some sweet karma. Personally, why the big YouTubers don't want to actively condone the actions of these thieves, I personally think that the scalpers are the real thieves. They're stealing from everyone, not just the consumers who want to be able to pay MSRP for new consoles, but Sony themselves. You may think, oh, but at least with all the consoles being sold, Sony is making hand over fist in sales on consoles, but you've got to remember that Sony is taking a loss for every console sold. They've got to rely on game sales to make that money back, so if there's thousands upon thousands of unopened PS5s just sitting in warehouses or scalpers' homes, they aren't making any money in the end, and it's just hurting everyone. As for scalpers being thieves, there have been literal cases of them being thieves. Between selling empty boxes online or just straight up running away with your money, there have even been scalpers that have impersonated well-reputable people like YouTuber 8-Bit Eric online, claiming to be him selling a PS5 just to run away with the money where victims can never get it back. But anyway, getting away from PS5, in terms of games Sony released, we got the wonderful Ghost of Tsushima, which honestly should have been the game of the year right there. We'll get into that wonderful story later as well. Unfortunately, right after that, the first thing I can think of is the dumpster fire, The Trash of Us Part 2, and oh boy, are you going to hear some wonderful thoughts about that game in this video. The game was absolute woeful quote garbage. Besides throwing away Joel to get Negan by some buff testosterone daddy issues having, whoa man, this game was just one big political agenda in a box, and I've been hearing nothing but negative things about it all year, and not just about the game itself, but the pathetic man behind it all, Neil Cuckman. Good old Neil Cuckman, featuring Anita Sarkeesian whispering trash in his ear while he's begged people to buy his game and to throw him votes for the Player Voted Award at the annual Game Awards, among many other things. Speaking of the stretched backside of us too, when I looked up the trailer to potentially use as background footage for this segment of the video, I kid you not, this iconic movie scene showed up in the search results.
Garbage Day! Huh? No!
So let that speak for the quality of the game on its own. But I should really get moving on, because with how much I despise this game and have grown sick of hearing about it all year long, I could insult this game all day long. As for some things that aren't ass, there was Spider-Man Miles Morales and Sackboy: A Big Adventure that released for both the PS4 and PS5. Admittedly, while I've seen a bit of Sackboy and I think it looks fun, I haven't really looked much at Miles Morales due to having never finished the first game. Still, I can at least imagine its leaks better than the Abby's hammered ass for us too. Japanese publishers have started migrating away from PlayStation and onto Nintendo Switch because of Sony's continued strict censorship rules with many Japanese titles. Hell, there have even been some attempts to migrate to the Xbox over PlayStation, but we'll get into that later. It's ironic because it's been said with censorship that Americans are all about violence, which doesn't pass well in Japan, while Japanese are all about sexualized content, which doesn't fly very well, especially nowadays in the US. But while some Japanese games have been flat out censored worldwide on the PS4 this generation, some games have been censored even harder in Japan. All I can say is that with my experiences with the platform over the years, I've not been the biggest PlayStation fan, and stuff like that is not exactly improving my opinion of Sony. In my opinion, when it comes to censorship of games, unless it turns into a full-on porn game, let the rating system do its job and leave it the hell alone. That's the one thing I'll give to Nintendo this generation. When it comes to that, they've been very pro-consumer. The PlayStation Vita, though discontinued last year, has been having issues for the latter half of this year, making it difficult to even purchase games for the system on the system itself. With how little support is left for the platform, with indie publishers like Retallica Games and Sometimes You pretty much being the last leg this system is standing on, issues like that haven't done any help in ensuring publisher confidence when publishers aren't even sure that their games can be bought on the system, let alone if they actually will be bought. All I know is that I hope for the best for the Vita next year, because it's my favorite handheld system, and despite the homebrew community doing a great job at keeping it going with ports like Grand Theft Auto 3 as well as Super Mario 64, I want to see more official releases for it in the future as well. And that's pretty much all there is to note about PlayStation, so let's move on to Xbox. Of course, the Xbox Series X and Series S consoles released alongside the PS5, but in a similar case, scalpers have grabbed most of them up. It's not on the same scale as PS5 because PS5 is the more sought-after platform, but it's still very difficult to find any new Xboxes online or in stores. Also, similar to PS5, the Xbox has had launch issues. Not as many from what I've heard, but there have been cases like overheating Xboxes. On top of that, there aren't really any games worth getting the system for, which I forgot to mention was also the case with the PS5, as most launch titles you can get on the PS4 as well. All I can say is that when the Series X was announced, I was eager to get my hands on one as soon as possible, and now that it's actually out, I'm not in any rush to try to find one. But besides the Series X and Series S launch, Xbox hasn't really made that many headlines this year, despite being the most pro-consumer platform, in my opinion. When it comes to exclusives released this year, like none. I mean, there's Gears Tactics, which even came to the PC first, and on top of that, I actually had to look it up to see if there even were any released this year, but what else? Seriously, I'm more of an Xbox gamer than anything else, and I can't think of a damn thing they've released exclusively on the Xbox that hasn't also come to PlayStation and Sony as well, besides a few small indie titles, and even then, I can't think of any by name. However, despite this, where Microsoft really hit it off this year was with their stellar lineup of games available in the Xbox Game Pass service. Month after month, Microsoft had updated the service with some pretty massive games, stacked alongside previously mentioned indie titles that have released day one on the service. In an even bigger move, Microsoft threw in EA access to Game Pass Ultimate free of charge, which pretty much threw in the majority of EA released titles this generation, as well as a ton of titles from the 360 and even a small taste of the original Xbox as well, all for free to subscribers. Honestly, the Game Pass service has been my main source of games on the platform throughout the year, even more so because due to the massive focus on Game Pass, Games with Gold has suffered immensely. It's had such a terrible lineup this year that I almost decided to make a rant on it, even though I've probably made a few of it, about how Microsoft should just kill the service. I can't remember a single month this year where the Games with Gold announcements video didn't have close to, if not more, dislikes than likes, as well as plenty of angry comments. So much so that I believe one of the announcement videos they took down and re-uploaded, only for it to get mass disliked again. Thankfully, January's lineup is actually pretty good, but I can almost guarantee that the rest of 2021 will be filled with scraps for Games with Gold. Moving on from Game Pass, there was one pretty big game that landed exclusively on the Xbox One. The North American version of Phantasy Star Online 2 launched as an Xbox One console exclusive, even though I'm pretty sure a PS4 or PS5 version will follow within the next year, and maybe even a cloud-based Switch version. My friend has been playing the game for years on PC, and not even the fan-translated version either, but the original Japanese version. So it was great to finally be able to hop on myself, as well as have someone to walk me through it, as the only Phantasy Star game I've semi-extensively played is Universe on the 360. Unfortunately, the US and Japan don't share the same servers, so if you've previously played the game or have friends that have, you'll have to start over if you want to play with them, and all the previous crossover content, like the Hyperdimension Neptunia content that I tried to go after when I first started playing, isn't on the US servers. Microsoft delayed Halo Infinite's release till later next year to ensure quality. Many people, myself included, feel that the Xbox One version may be holding the game back since it was supposed to be launched on last gen as well. Honestly, while I was looking forward to it since I have Game Pass, I'm fine waiting for it to be polished up, and even if the last gen version ends up getting canned, I'm fine with that as well, since by the time it comes out, I plan to already have a Series X to play it on anyways. Perhaps Microsoft's biggest move this year was their buyout of Bethesda for a massive $7.5 billion. With how massive a collection of IPs Bethesda owns, if Microsoft actually chooses to be smart about it and stop releasing their IPs on rival consoles, especially the frickin' PlayStation of all things, then they could gain a massive advantage over the competition and sell a lot more Xboxes in the future. I mean, imagine the Elder Scrolls 6 available only on the Series X and S, and of course PC, but still console exclusive to the Xbox. I'm pretty sure that that title alone is enough to make PlayStation owners that don't also have a PC throw some cash for at least a Series S, but we all know that console sales aren't Microsoft's strategy apparently, so they'll probably continue releasing titles on the PlayStation as well just to get more sales. The last bit of news is one that actually happened a few days ago, on Christmas to be precise, and it's coming back to one of the things I mentioned earlier about Japanese publishers flocking to Xbox. Well, one particular publisher, PQ, approached Microsoft about bringing the latest Galgun game, Galgun Returns, which is a remaster of the original, to Xbox One. In fact, they had the game finished on Xbox One and had submitted it to Microsoft for review, and Microsoft wouldn't have any of it because despite what they've said in the past, they couldn't come to an agreement with P-Cube on terms of, you guessed it, censorship. P-Cube stated that they couldn't ensure consistency of experience across all platforms, which you know what that means. The irony is that the original game did come to Xbox originally, the Xbox 360 in fact, a year before the PS3 version, a little more actually. Despite being in Japan only, as ridiculous as that is due to how low sales have been of the Xbox in Japan, the game did come to the 360 platform back in the day, so the fact that they don't want basically the same game just upgraded on the Xbox One is ridiculous. And yeah, I know management of the Xbox brand has changed since then, but it's still stupid. All I can say is Microsoft, you blew it. You keep this up, you're gonna end up in the same boat as you've been with the Xbox brand, where the Japanese don't really give a crap about the platform. I guess the moral of this story is that while, in my opinion, Microsoft has been the most pro-consumer of this generation, it doesn't mean that they're completely pro-consumer. Like I said, not a lot of stories regarding the Xbox platform this year, so now that we've talked about the 3 major platforms, let's just get into general news. E3 2020 was cancelled, of course, for obvious reasons. Nintendo held their own E3 Direct, but it was quite underwhelming. The Sonic the Hedgehog movie finally released. It was a lot better than expected. Also, Movie Sonic got a much-needed redesign from his horrendous revealed original version. I know it's not a game, but it's a movie based off a game character. More importantly, the first movie based on the character, unless we count the Sonic OVA, so I'll count it. The long-awaited Cyberpunk 2077 released a few weeks ago, and it's been one of the biggest dumpster fires I've seen since The Trash of Us 2, at least in how bad a reception it's been getting. Day after day, videos upon videos of countless hilarious glitches have been uploaded to YouTube, showcasing the horrendous performance on last-gen systems, especially the Xbox One, as well as the terrible graphics that many mock as a PS2 and even a PS1 looking game. The game went over a week without a single day passing without articles being wrote about more new issues that were found with the game, getting as bad as saves being corrupted for surpassing over 8 megabytes, to which the devs, even though they did end up fixing it, at the time said that they may, quote, may patch it in the future, which again they did patch, but people who already lost their saves were SOL. In the meantime, they told people to basically not play the game like it's supposed to be played by not picking up a lot of stuff to keep their inventory rather empty, to keep the save file size down. On top of that, releasing excuses and apologies for the quality of the game, as well as telling people to go to their respective platform and ask for a refund. Yeah, ask Sony for a freaking refund. See how well that goes. It didn't go well for anyone. It even got as bad as not only did Sony, of all people, eventually cave and start actually giving refunds, but they outright removed it from the PlayStation Store. So when it comes to digitally, it's now technically an Xbox exclusive.
Games play best on Xbox One.
But you know what? Despite all the issues, I'll say that I've actually been enjoying the game. Not only am I so drawn into the story and all the characters, but I love the gameplay too. I love Night City, even if the performance does make it a little bit of a hassle to get around, especially while driving. And I'm playing the Xbox One version of all things. Also, I'd like to point out the irony in the fact that apparently Google Stadia is currently the best way to play the game. Just let that sink in. Probably the last time you'll ever hear me mention the Google Stadia. The Game of the Year awards happen as they do every year. Only this year was a special shit show for the fact that it was rigged in the Ass of Us Shark 2's favor. Not only did that heaping pile single-handedly win more award categories than any game in any previous years, but it somehow took home the Game of the Year award. And with every award won, you could see Neil Cuckman all like, yay, I'm so happy. I'm so excited. Thank you. Thankfully, Ghost of Tsushima won the only award that actually mattered, the Player's Choice one, which I would have loved to get a cup of the salty tears Neil Cuckman must have made from not brainwashing enough people into voting for his dumpster baby. And you know what? While the rigged Game Awards may have named the Splash of Pus to the Game of the Year award, I'm going to name it the worst Game of the Year. Personally, if all the games nominated, I think Ghost of Tsushima should have won the award. And if I'm being a bit bold in saying this, I might even say that if it hadn't come out after the Game Awards, that Cyberpunk 2077 should have won. Yes, I know the game has been in the headlines day after day for more than a week with no shortage of issues between glitches, graphics, performance, game-breaking bugs, save corruption, and much more, but I believe when/if these issues are ironed out eventually and that the game is brought to normal semi-bug-free state, that between the gameplay and story, it's absolutely worthy of a Game of the Year award. Despite all the problems, I've been having a blast playing it and I'm really invested in the story, despite the fact that, again, I'm playing the base Xbox One version, the alleged worst version of them all. So let's wrap up the general news with some individual releases. Resident Evil 3 Remake came out in the beginning half of the year. Let's just say that it didn't have the same reception as Resident Evil 2 Remake. I'll put it this way, it was so underwhelming that my friend, who is a die-hard Resident Evil fan, decided to just watch a playthrough of it online rather than buy it himself. And to this day, he still hasn't even picked up a used copy of it, and we've seen some for as low as 15 bucks. If that doesn't speak for its level of disappointment, I don't know what does. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War released as the current Call of Duty of the year, and all I can say is yes, it's another Call of Duty. In fact, the only news worth mentioning about the game is how bad it's performed on systems, and was even responsible for breaking both PS5s and Xbox Series consoles. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 remake came out, and it was loads better than the rush job that was the last game, THPS 5. Something like this is what should have happened with the series a long time ago, but the one thing that still bothers me is the fact that THPS 5 ended up so bad because it was rushed just so Activision could have just one more Pro Skater game before their license expired, and despite that, Tony Hawk still trusted Activision to give them another chance. I mean, I know it obviously paid off, but think about what would have happened if it didn't. We'd have had the series revived only to be killed yet again for possibly the last time. In the end, all I can say is that I'm glad it worked out. Left 4 Dead's successor, Back 4 Blood, was shown off, created by Turtle Rock Studios, the original developer behind Left 4 Dead. I've been looking forward to this game ever since the name Back 4 Blood was just a rumor, and I'll tell you, based on the gameplay footage that's been revealed, this is probably my most anticipated title of 2021 so far. I've always been a huge fan of the version of Left 4 Dead that Turtle Rock was developing before Valve bought it, so if this turns out anything like that, then it'll definitely be a must-buy. EA released another Star Wars game, Star Wars Squadrons, and from what I've been hearing about the game, it's hard to believe that it's actually published by EA. No microtransactions or DLCs so far, just free content updates and what sounds like an actually good game. And that's pretty much all I can think of for this year's roundup. Let me know if I missed any big stories in the comments section or any big game releases that I should have mentioned. It's been a long year for everyone, again, not just in the game industry. All I can say is that I hope 2021 is a better year in general. Anyways, thanks for making it through this long video. The year's been pretty tough for me as it has been with everyone else, but I plan to make it through the next year a lot better than I did this one, and I hope that everyone else can do the same. This is War Sarcy on the Game Clips channel, and I'm out.